has won no less than 28 pieces of silverware.
All right.
4 Arnold Steer trophies for the winners of the knockout or the pre-season competition. 3 third-grade premierships. No less than 8 second-grade premierships. 2 first-grade premierships. A 7s competition. A 9s competition. And in an incredible run from 1979 through to 1987, the club won 8 club championship trophies. It's an imposing record, but I'm sure it's one that the Mac Warriors are going to improve upon in the years to come. But tonight, we're going to take a look back at some of the history, culture and characters of Macquarie University. And we're going to do that through the eyes of a man who was there from the very start.
John Pinkerton.
54 years ago. In his time at Macquarie, he's been a player, a coach, a twice premiership winning coach. He's been the president of the club. He is a life member of the club. And over the years, he's been one of its staunchest supporters. Ladies and gentlemen, to help us with our trip down memory lane tonight, would you please welcome Brian Savage. Brian just said to me then as he went past, he said, "Be kind."
No, Teddy, no.
Of course I'm going to be kind, Brian.
Right.
Yeah, that's on, mate. Well, right off the bat, Brian.
Can I just say that the Chatham House rules apply here, and anything I might say derogatory cannot be used against me. And if you haven't got your solicitors here, well, you might find some truth comes out about you.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, Brian. Right off the bat, mate, this club is very close to your heart, isn't it? Macquarie University.
Of course it is.
How do you explain the deep connection with the club?
Well, when we kicked off in 1969, and we played in the North Sydney competition, a lot of the guys came out of Morris Brothers Eastwood, and we'd been through primary school and secondary school, and the great majority of the players either came from Morris Brothers Eastwood or Morris Brothers North Sydney. And we'd been in Morris Brothers Eastwood guys, we'd been in primary school and went through to year 12, and it just sort of played on that we wanted to be together, and it was through a football club. Because the other guys went off and played tennis, cricket and that sort of thing, but the guys that loved football, rugby league, and we also played union at Morris Brothers Eastwood. But we just kicked on, and everything just sort of seemed to flow from that.
Okay, well let's go back. Let's go all the way back to 1969. You, and as you say, some of your Morris Brothers Eastwood schoolmates, you're looking to continue your rugby league journey post-school. So what happens next?
Well, it just eventuated that we played in the North Sydney competition, and my first game for Macquarie was in 1968, I think it was, in a trial game where Jimmy Reed, one of my classmates from Morris Brothers Eastwood, came around at about 10 o'clock on a Saturday or Sunday morning, and we were supposed to go to the beach, and he said, "Oh no, we've got a football game on, I said, no, I don't want to play football today, it's too hot. And he said, no, we'll play football and then we'll go to the game. So we went to this trial game. It was horrendously heated. It was a scorcher of a day. And the two of us were too buggered to go to the beach, so we went to the old rancher after the game. And it just flowed on from that. I think we just all were great mates. But the thing that really I think we liked about it was that we welcomed new players, new people to the club. And I think a lot of people over the years have said that anyone was and everyone was welcome.
Hey Brian, explain how you welcome them with EVA.
Okay.
I told you I don't want any talk from you at all. You've got no right of response.
All right, so you leave the North Sydney competition behind you. In 1970, you're playing in the now University Cup. And right from the start, the team was very, very competitive, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, right from the start. And it wasn't until about mid-season that Ronnie Wilson came to us, and he was Kevin Liggett's uncle. But Kevin Liggett, one of the greatest players at Macquarie University and Morris Brothers Eastwood, he was the captain coach for the first 3 months of the competition, and then he got Ronnie Wilson to come over. And Ronnie sort of, instead of playing touch football, he got us into some training methods.
Right. Well, in those early years in the University Cup, the team made the grand final in the first year and again in the third year in 1972. In fact, that 1972 team, in an incredible statistic from that year, they scored 103 tries from just 15 games, including the grand final. Now, for those of you who are mathematically inclined, you will know that that is just a tick under 7 tries each and every game. That must have been one of the best teams you ever played in, right?
Without a doubt. And that was my first year. I moved from lock forward in the 70 and 71 to 72 to fullback at Ronnie Wilson's request. We just had speed to burn. And even though we were probably the smallest side in the competition, our defence, I think, was really good for and against. But we just had so much speed.
Well, in 1976, the team again made a grand final, the third time that the club had played in a grand final. You were beaten in a very closely fought game that day, 5 points to 3 by CCE.
Yeah.
But significantly, in that particular year, 1976, both yourself and Kevin Liggett were the first players in University Cup history to play 100 games. That must have been some honour for you.
And also the first players from Macquarie University to play 100 games. But Kevin Liggett and I went back to Morris Brothers Eastwood, and we were part of a relay team. For 2 years we were the top relay team in the Metropolitan Catholic Colleges, where we won the open relay, and with the same team won it for 2 years in a row. And many years later at a school reunion, Brother Baptist, who was our athletics coach, he said that we still had never had the same team win consecutive 400 metre.
Well, there you go.
100. But we suffered a lot of losses in the early days, and particularly grand finals. God, that was hard to take, to lose.
Well, 1977 was a watershed year for the club, with the arrival of Theo Burgess as the first grade coach. Theo had a reputation, but how did he shake things up, and what were his methods like?
Well, Quasimodo, Mark Lucas, has always said that the two occasions in Macquarie's history was BT and AT, before Theo and after Theo. He certainly changed the culture of the club. He turned out to be, he was sort of, after Macquarie University, when he left, he ended up at Cronulla, the Storm, Canterbury, and helping the first grade coach. So he had a great knowledge of football. He was a really, really decent guy, but God, he was a hard taskmaster to us, you know. It took us a while to get used to it.
You probably needed it.
Yeah.
You probably needed it. I could imagine you, back in those days, you needed a Theo Burgess in your life, didn't you?
I did. And the night that Rod Harvey had resigned, and John Pickerman, Jeff Brown and I met Theo at North Ryde RSL to have our introduction meeting to see, and we were the committee people. And Theo, we didn't know until that night, loved a beer. And we went match for match with him. And, and he only lived about 500 metres, so he walked down to the club and staggered home. John Pinkerton rings me the next day and he said, Jeff Brown's rang me. He said, did we offer him the job last night? And I said, I think we did. I think we did. And yeah, he turned up to coach, and he was a great. He turned the club around from a, very much a social club. And even though we had some great coaches and that sort of thing, but he really, and he got support from everywhere for us. But yeah, he turned the club around.
Well, just to add further to Brian's comments about Theo, he went on to be a recruitment manager for the Melbourne Storm, the Cronulla Sharks, the New Zealand Warriors and the Warrington Wolves in England. He was generally considered to be one of the best recruitment managers in the game. Now, and we're talking NRL level there, of course. Now, Brian, it is 1977 we're talking about. There was another significant event in 1977, and that was the Dolly magazine episodes. For those of you who don't know what the Dolly magazine episodes are, Dolly was a magazine for young ladies in the 70s, and they thought that it would be a good idea. They thought it would be a good idea to do a fashion shoot with a rugby league team as the backdrop to their models. And Macquarie University were chosen as that team. Now, fortunately or unfortunately, we have some photos from that photo shoot, which I'm now going to show you. Mick, if you wouldn't mind, the first photo from the Dolly magazine episode. Oh, well, there you go. The legend. That's not actually part of the Dolly magazine photos, but anyway. The next one, Mick. Okay, so a couple of things to note here. Firstly, you'll see this is the front cover of the said issue, and you'll notice the date of that is June 1977. It's a date that will live in infamy in Macquarie's history. Across the other side, of course, you will see very prominently in that photo there our guest interviewee tonight. You will find that he appears in every one of these photos. Could we have the next one, please, Mick?
Look where his hand.
Now I'm sensing you're already ahead of me, but don't worry, I will get to it. There's a few things to note about this particular photo. This shot was actually from a 1971 photo shoot that Dolly magazine did. They thought it was so good they backed up several years later for another one. This, believe it or not, is a young Brian Savage back in 1971. Now, there's a few things to note in this particular photo. Firstly, you will see that Brian is wearing a headband in this photo. Now, that's not unusual because we are talking 1971. It was the hippie era and headbands were all the rage, okay? Brian did have quite the bouffant do in those days, so he needed something to keep it in place, and of course gossamer hairspray just wasn't cutting it for him. The second thing to note about this photo is that Brian is not sporting a moustache. I find this quite incredible because I always thought Brian was born with a moustache. The third thing to note about this photo, and yes, I know you're way ahead of me, the positioning of Brian's left hand, and I make no further comment on that. Mick, if we could have the next photo, please. What to say, what to say. On this larger shot here, you'll see Brian striding out boldly with the two young ladies in front of him. He just loves the camera and the camera loves him, doesn't it? Look at him looking straight down the lens there, you know. Make sure you capture me, this is the best side.
Love the necklace too. Yeah.
On your right-hand side, you will notice Brian is playing front row. Now, who knew? I mean, he's dead set Mr. Versatility. He can play anywhere from full-back to front row. Or was it just another ruse to get in another photo? Who knows? Next photo, please, Mick. Oh, here we are. Here we have a couple of personal favourites of mine. Firstly, on the right-hand side here, the Brian jump photo. You'll note, and this is typical of a man, you will note that despite the distractions that are obviously in front of him, Brian only has eyes for the football. And this just shows the level of commitment he has, both as a player and as a coach. I can tell you, nothing, and I mean nothing, would ever come between Brian and his balls. I mean, it's football. It's football. This photo over here. So many questions, so little time. Firstly, you'll notice the very familiar figure of Brian Savage in yet another photo. Next to him is the current president of the club, John Pinkerton. Yes, John, you're complicit in all of this. We've got the evidence. There is a third legend in this photo who should be here tonight. I'm not sure if he's here. Is Roscoe Pinkerton in that house? No slinking under the table, Roscoe. We know you're involved, mate. All right, next photo, Mick. Well, what do you know? It's another photo with Brian in it. Here he is. Here he is just keeping a close eye on Steve Denning, making sure he doesn't get too familiar with the young lady in the photo. It's the kind of guy he was, you know. Albie Mangles. Albie Mangles, indeed. The great Steve Denning in that photo. Just before, I've got one more photo to show you, people, before we finish up with the Dolly magazine. But just before we show this last photo, Brian, I need to get a bit of clarification. The rumour is that this next photo is one of you in the dressing shed prior to a game wearing nothing but a jockstrap.
Oh, please, I'm not ready.
So we just need to know if this is actually the case. Mick, can you just show that last photo?
Quickly.
So Brian, is that you? Is that really you?
Of course.
And of course it is. He's been in every other photo tonight. Why wouldn't it be him? Okay, enough of Dolly magazine, people. You guys have got to go home and go to bed tonight. Those images are burned into your brain. And once they've been seen, they can't be unseen. All right, let's get back to sensibility, mate. It's 1980, and it was to be the breakthrough year for Macquarie. After 10 long years of waiting, finally, a premiership in the side coached by you, the second grade.
Yes, sir.
The club had appeared in 7 losing grand finals across all grades prior to that day. But something was stirring in the club. And at the start of that decade, did you have any idea of the level of success the club would have over the next 8 or 9 years?
Well, at that occasion, at that time in 1979, my second grade side had made the grand final and we got beaten, and you know that was devastating. But in 1980, and I can thank Rusty Boland for this, is that being a West supporter, I had seen West using the centre wing defence pattern, and Warren stole that.
Sorry, mate, just check that microphone. It's going in and out. Should be on.
And gave me a copy of the centre wing defence pattern, and I introduced it in 1980, just for reserve grade. And the following year when I went to first grade, we made it a club rule, we had the centre wing defence pattern. But I thought so, and Roy Masters was the coach at West at the time, and I input the centre wing defence pattern, where it just meant that everyone across the field had to do their share of tackling. And we had the best defensive record, and I could remember when we won the grand final on the 16th of August 1980. Adding extra time, we were 9-all at full time, and we went on to win 22-9. But in those 2 years as a reserve grade coach or second grade coach, I had great captains. Cole Cashel, Phil Bendel, Tony Carr, and Tony took over the reins in mid to late 1980 and turned out to be the first winning premiership captain for Macquarie. But yeah, it's the centre wing defence, and I could always remember after the game one of the rugby league officials saying that he'd seen one of the best defence patterns and defence efforts in years and years, and in all grades, first grade and that sort of thing. The boys were that good. And it was yes. So after we won that, you just thought, well, there were better things to do in the club, and that sort of greater things for the club to do. And my good mate here, JP Boy, John Pinkerton Young, he may sing for you later on. Appointed me first grade coach, and it took a few years to win the first grade, but we eventually did that.
Well, speaking of success following 1980, how important was it to the club to follow that success with another premiership the next season?
Well, yes, third grade, Terry Gumside went through undefeated. They had one draw that year, and that was that was Chunky's side coach that drew, and that was at Macquarie, wasn't it? Yeah. Drew with third grade, who went on to be undefeated for the year. And I think in my last days at Macquarie University, they were the only side that had gone through the season undefeated, third grade, and then to win in 81 down on the bottom oval.
Mate, I even think that at that time it was 5-0, 1 bit before the full-time bell. The Diggy Calabria went right up the sideline. I see Diggy up the back there. He got 5-all.
Yeah.
Just unbelievable.
So yes, and plus the fact is that we started to win the club championships in 79, 80 and 81.
Indeed we did. 1984 rolls around. By this time you were the first grade coach, and Macquarie would have won their first grade premiership that year. But it was to be a year of triumph and tragedy. Paul Gleeson's tragic death in a footballing accident was to rock the club to its core. How did the club recover and indeed go on to win a premiership that year?
Well, it was devastating, and because there's some guys here tonight who were classmates of Paul, were great mates of his, PJ, Sod, there's Mongo here. They all came out of Morris Brothers Eastwood, and to lose a 23-year-old on a tackle you'd probably see every Saturday afternoon, and Teddy, we were at the old Rancho. At that stage we did not know how serious it was, and we were at the old Rancho having a couple of drinks. Teddy had come back from Ryde Hospital. He'd got some stitches, hadn't you, or something like that, and he just said that one of the doctors had said to him, "Why are you doing this? We've got a young guy that who probably won't make it through the night." And he did, 23 years of age. But I think, through JPY, the committee, and the whole club were just devastated that somehow we got through it.
Yes, a very, very difficult period for the club, the whole club. Brian, in 1986 you were now the president of the club, and a new coach hits the campus by the name of Kevin McGarry. Kevin had an excellent winning record at Macquarie, including a second grade premiership in 1986, and also took the first grade side to another premiership in 1988. How did you find him, and what was his methods like?
Well, he was from outside the club. He coached successfully in the Balmain competition and had a great name. And I interviewed him, and I think he came earlier than that, because I'm sure he was reserve grade coach in '84.
Yes.
I think, yeah.
He may well.
But yeah, he just had a great knowledge of football. And he had sort of, sometimes I compared him to sort of Theo Burgess. He had that sort of attitude, positive attitude. But I thought he was a great coach, and he proved that with great premiership wins.
Well, Brian, in your own coaching career, the one thing you said you didn't like about the job was telling a player he's going to be dropped. Was that correct?
Yes, of course.
Okay, I'm glad you said that. Because I've got a question here from a member of the audience on this very subject. Now, I'm not going to tell you, Brian, who this person is, but I think it'll become apparent to you as we work through this question. Now, typical of the person we're talking about here, this is not just a one-part question, it's a two-part question. So please save your answer until the end, okay, if you don't mind. The question from a member of our audience goes this way. Brian, what is your recollection of why in 1982 you dropped me from first grade the week after I made my scintillating first grade debut, winning the Players' Player Award, scoring a runaway try and tackling anything that moved? The follow-up question is, do you agree it was a measure of the man that I came back bigger and better from that shameful decision? And would you like to publicly apologise to me here tonight?
As a current coach of the Macquarie University Warriors, no comment.
Well, the first question I've got to ask you, Brian, is, and I know it'll be difficult for you to answer this, but who do you think that player might be?
Teddy from Dundas.
You know what? It's Alzheimer's, mate. That's what it is. No, it's from PJ. Michael PJ Tamar.
Scared me for life! As a coach, if very interested in you as
Well, look, to be honest, PJ did come back, but it wasn't without its drama. He has been in therapy at least once a week for 40 years, Brian, and it's all due to you.
Well, if I have to apologise, I should also apologise to Cole Sherry because he missed a game of football to go to his sister's wedding. And when he came back, I dropped him. So I apologise for scarring you mentally and physically, the two of you, over the years. But I would do it all over again if I had to do it all over you.
Solidarity with Tuck there. Good on you, Tuck. Brian, 1987 saw the Glen Marsh coach third grade capture Macquarie's 5th premiership victory in 8 years. It must have felt like the success was just going to keep rolling on.
Well, yes, when you talk about Glenn, he was, I think, the only player that I know of that as a player won a premiership with Terry, and he also won it as a coach, Glenn Marsh.
He did indeed. He was part of the 84 squad as well.
Yeah.
As a player.
Yeah.
Brian's favourite.
Sorry? Yeah, no, so, at the club, and that were the years I was club president too, wasn't it? John had taken retirement.
Indeed.
Yeah, no, and I was coaching North Sydney at the time. That's why.
In the President's Cup.
Yeah. No, another fabulous effort.
And, well, the success did keep rolling on because the very next year, 1988, was the pinnacle of the decade for the club, with victories in both second grade that year as well as first grade. And we will see some of those games a little bit later on tonight, but it must have been particularly heartening for you to see your old mate Terry Tuss Murray finally achieve a premiership with the second grade team that year.
And God rest his soul, great bloke, fabulous guy, just a fabulous guy, and he went too early. Because he was one of my greatest supporters in the club, he deserved to win that premiership because of all the years as a player and as a coach.
Here. There's not too many finer than Terry Tuss Murray to come through the club. A tremendous guy. Brian, I'm going to leave you the 3 quick questions, and then I might hand you over to this audience to see if they might like to ask you. Yes, Mark Lucas, I can see you champing at the bit already. 3 quick ones to finish up with, Brian. Who, in your opinion, was the greatest ever Macquarie player?
I would... Obviously, they came out of my Super 13, out of 1988 reunion. I don't think I can separate Warren Boland, Paul Cooney, and Kevin Liggett. I think they were...
Of course, Warren Boland is present with us tonight. Well done, Warren.
Thanks, Brian. And personally, I'd have to vote for Kevin Liggett.
All right. Now, what about the most influential person in the club's history? And this could be a player, it could be a coach, it could be an administrator. The most influential person in the club's history.
Well, we've had some great administrators, some great players, some great coaches and that sort of thing. But I think that the person that has the greatest impact on the club as a player, in the administration, without a doubt, in my view, is John Pinkerton.
Good on you, Pinko, and well said, Brian. And finally, Brian, what do you consider to be your three biggest achievements in your time at the club?
Dolly magazine.
Both issues.
I'd have to say, and I put these all on the same level, our second grade premiership in 1980, our first grade premiership in 1984, and that we won the club championship for 6 years in a row. And that was just more important to me, coming from a corporate background, is that we had so many teams making the semi-finals, winning minor premierships and that sort of thing. And it just meant that, you know, as a club, to win it 6 years in a row, and I don't think it's ever been done again. So, and I think things like what made the club together. I think one of the best things I did for the club at that time was bringing the colours, where first grade, second grade, third grade and fourth grade were all broken in together. And the other thing was that I made Tuss the colours manager and the judge at the Olympic nights or anything like that, and no correspondence was entered into with Tuss.
Go the Greens.
Okay, well done and well said, Brian. Well, look, we've just got time for maybe 2 or 3 questions. So if you've got a question for Brian, oh look, there's Sod, quick as straight off the bat.
I think I already know what this one's going to be.
I'll just come down with the microphone, Sod, and if anyone else has got a question, just put your hand in the air and we'll see how you go.
Thank you, Ted. Look, Brian, I'm not going to embarrass you by asking what's the worst coaching decision you ever made, because we all know that was replacing me in the second half of the 1984 Grand Final. However, what I would like to ask you about is your video collection. Many of us learned the names of Vince Lombardi, Rafer Johnson, and others, where you would, as part of pre-game motivation, draw out the old VHS videotapes, and we would watch a man having his foot chopped off, various descriptions of Vince Lombardi, you know, you show me you got a good loser and I'll show you a loser, those kind of things. Have you still got a VHS player and watch those videos regularly?
Yes.
Have you got an answer for that, Brian?
I just said yes.
Have you got an answer? Oh, that was the answer. Okay, terrific. I just saw you go a shade of scarlet.
Ozzy's got a question.
No, we'll come to Luba first, and then I'll come back to...
Another grievance.
Brian, how are you?
Oh, thank you. Phil Luby, how are you?
Look, just in the same vein, I remember Vince Lombardi, you have nothing to fear except fear itself. You always had a penchant for playing some music before the games. I just wondered what your favourite was. Was it To Dream the Impossible Dream, Climb Every Mountain?
Oh, climb every mountain!
Yes! Will Rock You, and many others.
You'll never walk alone.
And ladies and gentlemen, the last word, or the last question, should go to Mark Quasimodo Lucas.
Brian, I don't know if it's ever been confirmed in an audience such as this, i.e. very large and varied, but is it true that you often uttered the words, still do, and we have phone conversations saying, the reason I've got a bad back is for carrying all you blokes on my shoulders.
Well, Mark, a few years ago I had a couple of hernia operations, and it was a surgeon who said that to me. And I said, what's caused these hernias? And he said, Brian, you've carried too many people in your life. But while I'm talking to you, Mark, you were my lucky streak because you were the team manager in 1980
Yep.
and you were the team manager in 84.
Yes, and loved every minute of it.
Yep. Thank you.
And that just goes to show that Brian always has an answer for everything. Ladies and gentlemen, he's been a great sport tonight. It's been a bit of fun. Would you please thank Brian Savage?
Who's the fattest bushy?
The new breed. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, please don't just leave the auditorium for the moment. We've just got a brief video to show you, which most of you will star in tonight. It only goes to 3.5 minutes, so you can go and get a drink after that. But just sit back, relax, and see if you can find yourself in this video tribute to Macquarie University.